Hi, I'm Sam from Made by Rasant. I just wanted to do a quick little video on card slots. I had a lot of problems with card slots when I first started out. I think I've now perfected them. I think they're nice and straight, and I've got a couple of tips to show you guys. So I thought I would show you guys how I am about to make this one, and so you guys can see how I do it and hopefully pick up a few tips for you guys as well. Just a quick video to show you guys how I do my card slots while I was doing one, because when I first started, card slots was something I really struggled with for some reason. It could be a combination of, straight lines, not knowing what to do, as well as just the wrong material. So I just thought I'd do this quickly to show you guys how I do it now to get perfect card slots almost every time. So a lot of pattern pieces don't actually come with the card slots. The reason this card slots piece, the reason being is the card slots are normally quite a big piece of fabric. So this one is, let's see, it's 8 inches by 18 inches. So as you can imagine, if this had to be printed as a pattern piece, this is an A4 sheet of paper. Like that's one, and then you'd need a second one, not to mention your, actually probably even more because that's almost as wide as that. So you'd need a fair few pieces of paper just to do that. So a lot of the pattern designers just give you the measurements. So what I found really helpful is I have this giant ruler that I've managed to find. This is a 12-inch by 24-inch ruler, and it is a lifesaver. So when I cut my fabric out, I can literally just measure it up and cut perfect rectangles every time. It is a bit broken, I'm sorry about that. But I'll show you now how I do this. So I now almost exclusively only use sophisticated twill for my card slots. The reason being is it has amazing structure. It folds really easily, but it's also lightweight. It does come out of Singapore, so Sophisticated Supplies is in Singapore. I'm in Australia, but what I found is when I order, and I order enough, the shipping cost actually works out so much better for us anyway, compared to any other product that I can find here. In fact, I've still not been able to find anything even similar to this. So I'm happy to wear the cost because it is just a superior product. It is also waterproof, which is amazing. I like anything in my bags, lining wise, to be waterproof because I am clumsy. So I assume everyone else is clumsy like me. Anyway, so let's get on to it. So I've already cut this piece out. Like I said, it's an 8 by 18 inch giant rectangle. What I like to do first is press it. Make sure you get those wrinkles out now. So I've already pressed this. This is ready to go. And then I like to mark on the front of my fabric. I know a lot of people are like, no, let's not do that because we don't want to leave marks. But if you mark on the edges, you don't have to worry as much about your marking showing. So that's why I like to do it that way. So for this one, I'm going to mark down all the markings that the pattern maker has told us to mark. So again, I use my giant ruler because why not? And this is something that I found is something that I've probably stuffed up a lot in the past, is the measuring. It's making sure you measure it straight. I know that sounds like something so simple, and like, surely she doesn't need to tell me this, but believe me, the amount of mistakes I made because I didn't measure properly or because they weren't complete straight lines, it's just a joke. So that's where, the big giant rectangle helps me because like the giant rectangle ruler helps me because it gives me a flat surface to work with, everything straight. I also like to use my cutting mat because as you can see, I'm now about to do a 1/2 inch marking. One thing I don't like about my ruler is this section here obviously doesn't have any markings. So I like to line up against my cutting mat, and then I can line up my 1/2 inch and line up the lines there with my half-inch line. So then I know I've got my half-inch, just like that. So I'm just going to quickly mark these all really quickly, and then I'll show you the next section, and just so you're not just watching me do this the whole time, because that would be boring. Okay, so now I've marked all my spots. So what I like to do now, it's probably a little overkill, but I find it works really well for me. So I now like to use scissors to cut little slots. So each of my lines, my dots, one is a fold line, one is I don't know what that's called. Anyway, the line that you fold to. So this is the line that you fold to. That's my first notch. So on the fold lines, I like to snip my dot that I've made. So if you are relatively new, normally your fold line is pretty much the line just above your smaller line, if there's two lines side by side. So I'll do that on the other side too. Just quickly cut those. When I first started, or when I first learnt this hack, I actually cut every single dot, so you can do that too. Just by cutting the dots, it just makes it a little bit easier to fold. So I'll just show you what I mean. So these are now cut on the side. So now when I go to fold, they automatically kind of give me an idea. So I can just put, it's cut there. So I put my finger on that, put my finger on that, line it down, and then I just finger press it. You can buy little roller things that people use to roll their seams. I actually did buy one and I haven't used it yet. I find finger pressing just as easy as having to find things that my toddlers like to steal. And this is one of the reasons why I like the sophisticated twill. Like, it's already holding its shape really well just from me doing that light press. And then we're going to come to the next line up. Going to line that up. So this is the line that we didn't cut a thing on. And then again, finger press. So there's a lot of finger pressing with card slots making. If you're not using twill and you're using any other material, you can do it with twill as well, but I don't find it necessary. Now is also the time to iron. So really take your time, measure out those slots, and then make sure they're lining up. One of the biggest mistakes you can make with card slots is having them wonky because you didn't measure it out correctly. And card slots aren't a quick thing, so you don't want to stuff it up. Now, if you're not ironing like me and you just want to make sure everything holds its place, just grab a little clip. Just clip that down. Okay. And then next slot again. So because of the cut, that folds really easily. Same on this side. Because of the cuts, I find that they then line up easier as well, because you've given the fabric a spot where it wants to fold because of the cut. So just finger press, finger press, finger press, and then line it up. And then I'm going to clip again. I should have had my clips ready. I didn't, because who has time for being organized when you've got two toddlers, right? Anyway, I should have. I didn't. Now I've clipped that. I think you saw I didn't finger press this yet. So make sure you finger press. The finger pressing just helps keep everything together, especially with the twill, because twill holds its shape. And then here we go. We've got the cut edge again, cut edge again. I actually, not on this one. So this one's a, as you could probably guess by how wide this is going to fit two lots of cards side by side. But I have actually done a quick little cheat video of a single, like a single row card slot, just doing it all one-handed because of how easy this twill is to handle. I know it sounds like I am twill obsessed, but I am, to be honest. I really am. Finding this has changed my bag making game. I used to hate doing card slots, but ever since I found twill and I found all these little tips. I don't even know if they're really great tips. To me, they really changed my game anyway. So that's why I thought I'd share it. And fold that together and clip it. Now, before we do anything else, make sure we are happy with this. So I'm going to bring this up a little bit closer. So make sure all the lines look pretty flat and level. If you are OCD, grab a ruler and check them if you need to. You can also grab credit cards now and check them to make sure your credit cards actually fit so that you've actually got the right size. And then we're going to go and top stitch all of these. So I'll roll you over there and show you how we top stitch. Okay, so I've now moved across to my sewing machine. So this is where we were up to. We had these all clipped on the sides. And now what I'm going to do is we're going to top stitch each of these lines. So top stitching to me is always done at 1/8 seam allowance. Some patterns call for something different, but this one as well is a 1/8 for card slots. And what we're going to do is, obviously we don't want to stitch these closed, so we're going to move each section out of the way as we go. So what I find works for me is clip each section on its own. I've used a big clip on this side, so it clips 2 sections at once, but we clip each section on its own, and then as we unclip it, we can fold the back away. So see how that back folds? Oh, let's see if that will focus. Folds back to here so that it's not in the way, it won't be in the way of my stitching, because my stitching is all the way up here. And it's the same on that side. So I just hold it back, and then I'm going to top stitch this at a 1/8 seam allowance. Something that I find super helpful as well when you're starting out, it might not be the most financially viable, but I like to have as many threads as possible that match my fabric. The reason being is that way it's a lot more forgiving. If your line isn't 100% straight, or you needed to go back in and redo something, it just makes it a little bit cleaner. So here you go. So that's that line top stitched, and now as you see, we can pull this back up and that's not in the way. Now, before we move on to the next one, because I want this to stay in the spot that it's supposed to be, because the marked line is still there, I'm going to get my clips again, and I'm going to clip up here to hold it in place. So one of the hardest things with card slots is if it slides and moves around, and then so it's no longer straight and level. So we spent a lot of time obviously measuring everything out to make sure it was all perfect. So it's equally important to make sure as you're stitching and sewing that you're not having your fabric move around on you. So I tend to be stingy on clips, but not when I'm doing card slots. When I'm doing card slots, I always use my clips. Now, obviously that mark's still there, so match that back up and clip it. And same on this side, that one came off a little bit. Match that back up and clip it. And then now we're down to the last one to do. So fold it. Mark that line back up and clip. Mark that line back up and clip. And then with this one, obviously, because it is a double section, I'm going to need to stitch right up the middle to kind of lock that in place. So that's no longer a problem. Not no longer a problem, but so it's divided into 2. So what I like to do is fold it in half, and then I find my center point, give it a little clip in within the seam allowance. So now I have a little spot that marks exactly the center. And then again, I am top stitching right here. And how do I keep a straight seam allowance on this? We go slow, make sure that's perpendicular. Perpendicular, is that the right word? Yeah. And I'm lucky, I sew with the Vintage Singer 201K. These guys are amazing straight stitch machines. So they pretty much go straight for me, to be honest. So I've just gotten to the end now. There's a couple of ways to do this. I like to turn myself back around and go back the way I came. But with this pattern, it actually tells you to just close it off there. So I'm going to stitch that up. Okay, so I've just cut that off. I've left long strings on the bottom as well as the end where we finished. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to the back. I'll bring this in a bit closer. And I'm going to pull on this thread. And as I pull, you'll see a little bit from the front has come out. So I'm going to use, this is a seam ripper. Probably isn't the best idea to use a seam ripper so you don't rip the seam, but I couldn't find my pokey. And then we gently pull that through. And what that does is it doesn't take any of your stitches away, but it pulls that front thread across to the back. And then we're going to tie this off. I am not the best at tying knots, so please do not judge me. But all I'm doing is just tying this off so that it's nice and secure. And then a nice little bit of, nice little thing you can do as well is just add a little dot of glue there. It just helps keep everything together. And we're going to do the same at the bottom as well. So we're just going to tie that off to keep that all secure and together as well. And now that that's all done, we've got our center stitch line and that's all done there. Now, some pattern designers call for it, some don't, but the edges. So I like to baste this together as well. Just, it keeps everything together. So you don't need to baste from right at the edge. You can, you just need to baste from where your first fold line is. So by doing this, you keep everything in place before you do your next section, whether that is just attaching another piece of side fabric to it or yeah, just whatever it's doing. Now, one thing to bear in mind, these fabrics, even though you've got that center stitch line, the fabric can still move. So make sure you put enough downward pressure on as you're stitching or sewing to make sure that it doesn't move so that you don't, at the last minute, end up with wonky card slots, which again, I have had so many wonky card slots. This is why I am doing this video, because I figured if I have wonky card slots all the time, someone else does. Now, I like to sew from the bottom up and not the top down. The reason being is when you sew from the top down, there's a higher chance of everything shifting and moving out of place. So we're going to do from the bottom up, just to pin all that fabric in place. It is a little bit harder for me anyway on this side because obviously I'm not used to stitching on this side. I like all my seam lines are on that side. I don't know, maybe it's a left-handed thing, but I always struggle on this side a little bit more. So I do take it a little bit slower, and that is done. So cut that all off. And that should now give you perfect card slots that are all equal, none of them wonky, and then you can go on to doing whatever you're doing with them. So thank you again for joining me on making our card slots together. I hope I gave you guys some tips and there was something there that was useful for you. If there's anything else you'd like to know, or if there's any feedback for me, please let me know. Leave me a comment, I will get back to you. I might be slow at responding, but I definitely will read it. But yeah, let me know. And if there's anything else you'd like me to cover, let me know as well. I'd love to hear from you guys. So thank you so much for joining me.